Hello. So the myth has long been that in order to stay young and beautiful looking, we need special wrinkle creams. According to Dr. John Lakey, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most of those wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing more than glorified moisturizers. So recently, Dr. Lakey has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practice to pursue a revolutionary anti-aging technology breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetics industry. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the age rewinder method, because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. I could do with some of this stuff. Dr. Lakey has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. The video's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, thousands of women, what about the men, are reporting they look decades younger. So you can find out more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/Ross or click on the link in the description box below. That's bhmd1.com/Ross. Now, there is one thing that Dr. Lakey asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please share this video with your friends and loved ones. Together, we have the power to make as many women reclaim a youthful look as possible. Go watch the video at bhmd1.com/Ross right now, or just click on the link in the description box below. G'day and welcome to what I think will be a very special episode of Reality Check. You may have seen the promotional publicity by now for a very major story which we intend to broadcast on NewsNation this coming Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on NewsNation. It's a huge story. It's one I've been working on for over 2 years. You'll recall back in 2023, we broke the David Grush interview, where the former NGIA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency insider, revealed what he knew from his exhaustive investigations into the legacy retrieval program. The big criticism always of David Grush was that he didn't have any direct personal knowledge of the legacy program. I actually understand he does, but he can't talk about it. But today, I'm going to tell you about a story that will, I suspect, rock Washington and possibly have a huge influence on a lot of people around the world who've wanted answers to that big question for many, many years. Are we alone? And the short answer, we're not. This week, we are presenting definitive evidence from first-hand whistleblowers, people who have operated within the legacy crash retrieval program, that is, retrievals of non-human craft. Principal informant is a former, very well-respected Tier 1 operator, highly trained Tier 1 military operator, trained at the elite levels of the US military. His service verified and testified to by 3 other witnesses. The account that he gives of what he saw on what he euphemistically refers to as the range, the retrieval of non-human craft, is backed by 2 of his colleagues who were there with him. This is going to be a groundbreaking story. And yes, we're running it right before the inauguration because we want to send a message. The message is, it's time for the public to be told the truth. The government, or sections of the government, have been knowingly, intentionally lying to the public for years. And if they want to fight, they can have one, because people are now prepared to come forward. This week, you're going to hear from a first-hand whistleblower. Let's have a listen. So tell me about the moment when you realised that you were involved in a retrieval of non-human technology, alien tech.
So it became very clear the first time our communication process and procedure was modified. And then just visually looking at the object on the ground, you could tell that it was extraordinary and anomalous. It was not human.
How close did you get?
Well, I was a helicopter pilot and I operate with 150 foot to 200 foot long line. So I got within 150 feet of this object.
What did you see?
I saw an egg, a white egg.
Was there any visible propulsion system on it?
No, not what we would know. There's no engine, there was no thermal signature. I was operating at night when I finally came in to pick it up, so I'm working under night vision goggles at the time. And it was quite clear. I flipped them up, flipped them down, and looked at it a couple of different ways.
How did you know that that egg-shaped object was non-human in origin?
Well, visually, after seeing all kinds of things in my past, it was clearly something that was ridiculously looking. It's inconsistent with anything I'd ever seen before. I can also tell you that the reaction by my team, we all knew we were dealing with something extraordinary.
And at no stage were you ever subsequently told that the craft was of non-human origin?
I will tell you that during this process, over the last couple of years, it's been confirmed to me by ranking members of the UAP task force that what we were working with that night was in fact an HI, and it was not a unique experience.
Now, as you'll see in this week's story, the bona fides of our witnesses are verified to our satisfaction. We've been able to check their credentials and their service with people at the very top of the national security establishment and inside the Congress. We know that their evidence has already been presented to the Pentagon's UFO Investigation Office, ARRO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. We know that evidence has been given by our primary whistleblower to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence. Congress already has this information. We've made sure that our whistleblower follows the proper form to ensure that the proper authorities are notified and alerted to what the significance is of this witness has to say. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but it's also going to be very interesting to see what the new government's response, the new president's response is to the ongoing drone incursions. Because it's quite clear there is a connection between the drone incursions and the phenomenon of UAPs, because by definition, objects which are unidentified and displaying anomalous behaviour over our country are indeed UAPs. And that's what these drones are. I'm not even sure that we should be using the misleading term drones, because that connotes the suggestion that what these objects are human-made, normal, prosaic objects. It's quite clear that the new president, President Trump, is aware of something relating to these drones. And I rather suspect, I'm increasingly suspicious, that what the new president thinks is that we actually don't have any blooming idea what these objects are, and we don't want to tell the public that because we're fearful of the public reaction. Let's have a listen to what President Trump said at a meeting of GOP governors very recently.
Do you have any idea whatever happened to the drones?
What happened to drones?
Well, you had said that you knew you thought the government knew what was happening with these drones over New Jersey. There were some by Bedminster.
I don't know. They're over Bedminster a lot, so I can imagine. I'm going to give you a report on drones about one day into the administration, because I think it's ridiculous that they're not telling you about what's going on with the drones. And it's not only with me. Glenn was telling me today that in Virginia they have drones all over the place too, and nobody's reporting it. I don't know why they're not. Do you want to say something about that?
Just one quick comment, which is we are home to the largest naval base in the world in Quantico, and we house a lot of the SEAL teams. And have a huge national security infrastructure. And now for 2 years running, we have had drone incursion over secure airspace, and we still don't know why. And I think that's absolutely unacceptable. And I think President Trump and the new leadership coming in, I think will work diligently to understand who's behind this and what we do in order to stop the digital surveillance of all of our secure infrastructure.
Is it dangerous?
Well, I can tell you this. While we were dealing with a terrorist attack in New Orleans, we had drones being flown over our nuclear reactors in Louisiana. And we brought that attention to the FAA. We've been asking the FAA to give these states the ability to mitigate these drones, and it's sitting on some bureaucrat's desk. And that's real.
Nobody knows. They don't want to talk about it. Go ahead, Governor, you're going to say?
I was just going to say we have drones in Wyoming flying over our infrastructure as well. And it's incredibly frustrating that we not only have no way of knowing what it is, but nobody knows how to deal with them.
They don't want to talk about it, and nobody knows why. They don't want to talk about it. That could be us sending drones. I hope that's the case, us doing it and doing research, and maybe they don't want to talk about it from that standpoint. I hope it's not an enemy, but we're going to find out on the 21st, the day after. You have to give me a little time for the inauguration, but shortly thereafter, we'll give you a report on it. We'll tell you exactly what it is. They know, and it's very strange that they aren't talking about it.
So ever since mid-December, ever since the people of New Jersey and much of the east coast of the United States was gaslit by the National Security Advisor's spokesperson, the suggestion has been that the public are misidentifying normal objects, prosaic aircraft, for some kind of anomalous object, be it drones or otherwise. That explanation you will see today simply does not wash. In fact, I would go so far as to say I think the government knows that explanation doesn't wash. There are two possible explanations. Either the government knows and it doesn't want to have to tell the public that it has no explanation for these objects, or it knows what these objects are and it doesn't want to tell them. Either way, it's a really bad look. And the interesting thing is, the other line that's been coming and that's been parroted by much of the tame mainstream media has been the line that there's been a lessening in the reports of these objects, or in fact, no reports of these objects since Christmas. That's completely untrue. And if you want to hear what's really going on, let's go to the source. Let's talk to one of the top spokespeople on this issue in New Jersey Mayor Sam Morris, who's from the Mine Hill Township. And what he's telling us, these objects are still being seen. There's been little, if any, lessening in the frequency of the sighting of these objects, and they're still of grave concern to the people of New Jersey. Okay, so we're now joined by a friend of the program, Mayor Sam Morris from Mine Hill Township in New Jersey. He's spoken to us before, and welcome back, Mr. Mayor. Are you still seeing these mystery objects? I refuse to call them drones because we clearly don't know for sure what they are.
I am. I've seen a few of them in the last week, very, very specifically identifiable by the way they're flying.
Now,
Sure.
the thing that really strikes me about this, sir, is you spoke out very strongly way back in December when the White House tried to suggest that you're all having delusions in New Jersey and you're not really seeing these objects. How do people in New Jersey feel about the fact that essentially the line from government until right now has been that you're not actually seeing these objects and they're nothing to worry about, you're just misidentifying known aircraft? Do you find that at all a plausible explanation?
No, part of it is, yeah, but you know, the feedback I'm getting from people here in New Jersey is the Jersey salute, which is just like flip your teeth or other hand gestures. Is it fair to say that the 60 or 70% of what people were seeing were planes, especially, and I can tell you there's a huge change in the quantity of things in the air since Christmas, since around the 20th, 26th, 27th, it has really died down quite a bit. I would say now it's probably a 90-10 split They're, you look up, oh, that's a plane. You look up, oh, it's, whatever. Oh, that's a star. I did have someone attest to me that Venus was a drone numerous times. And I actually went to the lady's home and talked to her, said, ma'am, look at this website. That's Venus, but it's because they're being led around by the nose and being, kind of lied to, at whether they are drones, whether they are some other object, they're definitely not airplanes. The way they move, the things they do are definitely give it away.
Now, I note, sir, you're not the only person speaking out about this issue. The Morris County Commissioners, back in mid-December, they called on the federal government to marshal all federal resources at their disposal to end the unauthorised flight of these drones. They said they consider this to be a matter of national security and that the government has a duty to the people of New Jersey and the rest of the nation to identify the source of this incursion. Is that your position as well? I mean, do you regard this as a national security concern?
Yeah, national security is a little bit over the head of a local mayor, but I would say that I consider it a significant matter of security. I've said that since the beginning. Just the size of these things, if one of them were to lose power and fall out of the sky, things like that. But at the same time, you have the government. If the government came out and said, "Look, they're us," or we really genuinely don't know, but what they came out was, you people are all drinking the same Kool-Aid. And you have no idea what you're looking at. So that makes me actually relax a little bit, because it tells me that, of course, they know what it is. Of course, they know what's going on. And we all have our speculations. I have mine. But it makes you say, okay, they know. They're just not going to say. And,
what is your speculation? What do you speculate that it is?
So here's where I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit. As much as I try very hard as a public official to keep an open mind, right? You have to deal with your residents. The upper layers of government have things they cannot and will not tell you. And usually it's for our own good, right? Maybe there's a security thing going on or something like that. Personally, I think this is some kind of an audition. When you look at the players that are out there in the commercial drone space and the military drone space, when you look what happened with U.S. drones in Ukraine, when you read articles that Ukraine is flying drones that are running on AI and fiber optics and these other things, and the U.S. military admits we can't really defend against them, but fortunately it's not in our territory. I think you have, there's a Homeland Security bill passed on December 20th that addressed Chinese chips in drones, and certain drone manufacturers have different issues. You wonder if that's legit or if people are being targeted. You have a company, Archer Aviation in Connecticut, that is partnering with the big boys for billions of dollars. Suddenly their stock's up 5x, since early December. What's going on that we don't know about? Anduril, there's a company called Anduril. The brother-in-law of the owner of that company, or the CEO of that company, is Matt Getz. They have an office right across the street from the FBI. Look them up. It's a little storefront office. I think these people are all lobbying for drone contracts. They're pushing for expanded contracts, billions of extra dollars in military spending. But the good thing about this is these guys are all, for the most part, on our side. When you go to, I think it's Anduril's website, their splash page is the U.S. is behind, and we got to get our butts in gear and get caught up with the rest of the world. Well, that's in our benefit, right? That's in defense of Americans. So I think there's going to be huge drone contracts coming out, and I think these companies, as part of the bid packages, are going to have to be able to explain, hey, here's what our drones can do. Here's what how they did flying with AI and other technologies. When the state police in New Jersey say they pursued a drone and it went dark numerous times, lots of government agencies. One of these things interfered with an air ambulance, wouldn't let it land at Raritan Valley College. And the government says we're seeing things, they're up to something. And, you can say follow the money, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if these guys are working on our behalf. But there's a lot of money at stake. And I think, again, if you're going to go out for a bid package, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate that you can do what you say you do. And maybe the government said, hey, let these guys fly over a heavily populated area and demonstrate what they can do.
It'd be a hell of a way to do an audition, to lie to the people of New Jersey, deceive the entire country, and allow corporations to operate unhindered over restricted airspace at a time when the public are clearly genuinely concerned. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, Mr. Mayor, is it appears there are distinct objects. A lot of people have been describing to us, you see a glowing orb, some kind of glowing, pulsing light. That's one type of object. And then the other thing is you see a more distinct object, which does, on the surface, appear to look like a drone. Is it possible that there are two different operators operating in our skies with two different types of technology?
You know, I always try to stay calm when it comes to answering a question like that, because it's a little over my head, you know, who can do what and how they would do it. Do I think there's one company up there? You know, I'm going to go with my audition theory, right? Or my bid spec theory. Do I think there's one company up there doing it? Nope. I think there's several. There almost has to be. You know, and to your point of previous point was, is it a responsible thing to do to let these people fly over restricted, unrestricted airspace? One of the things that came out of this is there's only 2 military bases in the country that have permanent restricted airspace. Besides the area of the White House, they put restrictions. This is the thing. They say there's nothing to this. Nobody's up to anything. And now in New Jersey, and I'm very close to about 35, what do you call it? The electrical stations where they transform the power. All of a sudden, they've got restrictions over those. But you're putting a restriction over those, but these things don't exist. Really? That sounds good. You know, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know your county police, who we've also spoken to, are still concerned about these objects and still reporting them. Are you still in touch with people from the FAA, Department of Homeland Security, FBI? Are they still on location monitoring these objects?
I don't know. As far as statewide, that might be more of a question for the governor's office. But I know that there hasn't been any activity around here at all. Like this has gone dark. Starting around 27th of December, this has completely gone dark.
So do you get the impression that there's a willful effort by government to shut this issue down and push the line?
Sure.
My strong suspicion is that government's trying to shut this down. They're trying to suggest still that you're not seeing these objects, and yet you are.
Well, what do we know about the Cold War and Vietnam and the different things that go on, right? We know that the government may be doing something that's for our actual benefit and protection, but they can't tell. Maybe they can or can't tell us, right? They could maybe even let a little bit more out. Say, hey, folks, it's us, but we can't tell you. But they're not doing that. But then I believe they've engaged in a little bit of a disinformation campaign, which is what the government does, right? At federal level, they'll come out and say, well, there was an article that came out that I forget the name of it, but at the military base Earl, which is in South Jersey, that some of these were emanating from them and some of these were emanating from the water. I mean, there are drones that are completely amphibious. There's been a bit, you know, they go in and out of the water. That people don't know that, but we've learned that in the last 6 weeks. So is that a disinformation campaign? Why do you publish something like that if you're saying that none of this exists and everybody's crazy? I think it's all to just create a garbled point of view, I guess, that, you know, well, what is it? And you got 9 things to point at. Back to your point about those orbs. I've been shown a video of one of those, and it looks like a pulsating, rotating jellyfish. I could probably get it even emailed over to you guys. It looks like a jellyfish that is kind of almost rotating inside on itself. It was taken in the next town over from me by someone I know, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And they got a great video of it. What is that? I have no idea.
Mr. Mayor, the objects you've specifically seen, are they more consistent with the car-sized, SUV-sized drone objects that we've seen previously?
I'll tell you what I've seen in the last 3 weeks, last couple of weeks. I've seen 3 or 4. Last night I saw one that had, I'm going to say this on national media. I saw one last night that had taillights. It had a square. I couldn't get my camera to get, and the thing was moving. It had a square rectangular panel on the back of it. 4 or 5 lights across. There were lights in the front of it. Nothing was blinking, which is required by the FAA. So I don't know what it was. and it just came across Mine Hill, and I was going out about 10 to get my son from work, and there it went, and it banked and went another direction. And they were lights. They weren't some kind of burners or something like on the back of an SR-71, that kind of thing. I've seen over Dover, New Jersey, which is our neighboring town. I drive through there. Friday night, I saw about 10:15. I saw a drone come out over Dover going southeast, and it just made a right turn. And it was a drone because it was all lit up, not blinking, and it just made a right turn to the northeast. And I mean, just changed directions like that. It wasn't a high speed thing. It wasn't wailing, flying through. It just went up. I'm going to go this way now. I saw one hovering over St. Clair's Hospital in Dover. Same thing. It changed directions. It went up over a hill. To the sides of them, I would say car hood, maybe the size of a car hood, if that gives perspective.
And are you seeing any visible means of propulsion? I know a lot of them have the sound of an engine, but have you seen propellers? Have you seen any evidence of jet turbines that propel these objects?
What's interesting, I consulted a couple of professional photographers, and they asked why these things are so hard to get a picture of, and they had a perfect explanation. They are usually they're composite material, which is a lot of times it's gray or black, against a black background with lights on them. And the lights create a contrast, and this is probably by design. The lights create a contrast that you can't get a picture of them, because if you go into your settings and try to brighten up your picture to see the body of it, the lights overwhelm the lens of your camera, and you just get whiter and whiter. I know people have been out there with night cameras and stuff, but the lights on them just overwhelm the night vision part of it. But I haven't heard a drone ever, but no whirring sounds, no whooshing sounds, no jet sounds or helicopter type sounds. We've just seen them. They're 200 feet up, so they're pretty far away unless it's a louder sound.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's clear from what you're telling us that the drones have not gone away in New Jersey, despite the government's best efforts to tell the public that that's the case. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll keep on digging for answers.
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, it's my pleasure to now bring back in my favourite citizen scientists, John and Jerry Tedesco, the two Long Island brothers who've been doing some phenomenal research off the coast, reviewing strange objects that they've been tracking with their mobile observatory laboratory, which they're actually sitting in at the moment. Good evening, good morning, or whatever time of day it is over there, gentlemen. How are you both?
Hello again, Ross. Early evening. How you doing, Ross?
So I'm blown away by the video that you've sent me most recently, which is an evening. I think you've only just recently put it together, but it was recorded in November. But what I think it shows is some of the best video yet of the anomalous objects that are being seen, not just off the coast of New Jersey, but also where you've been filming. I think it's off Fire Island, that strip of land off Long Island there.
Yes.
Tell me what you're seeing.
Okay, so this was back in November of 2022. And it happened over a 3-week period. It was about a week in October and about 2 weeks in November that we saw these, a mixture of objects. We were tracking these orb-like objects, and then these drone-like objects showed up. And they almost looked like they were doing some kind of surveillance, and they had some flashing lights. They were pulsating. They were shining, occasionally shining searchlights, or appeared to look like search beams, laterally outward, not towards the ground where you would expect that they were searching for something, but laterally outward. And the lights that was shining on, there was other objects out there, the orb-like objects. The only thing is, the only way we could see those is we were using infrared cameras to see them. Right. Otherwise, you would just see the drones. Mm-hmm.
Because in the video that you very kindly sent us, you can hear Donna is possibly looking over your shoulder, John, as you're looking through the camera.
Yes.
But so you couldn't see those objects with the naked eye?
No, they were only visible in the infrared camera systems and night vision, except when the drones had some kind of either a spotlight or some kind of a headlight on these objects that was directly in front of them. Yeah, they would reflect, the light would reflect off the objects, even though you couldn't see them.
Right. They almost like they were they're tracking the orbs themselves. So it was a combination of drone-like objects and orbs that we were seeing that night.
There's quite a funny moment where Donna Linardo, your colleague, is on the beach next to you, John, and she's going, "I hope they're not coming to take us," or something like that.
Yes.
I mean, it is quite spooky when you look through the camera, because whilst you can't see them with the naked eye, when they pulse up, these orbs are huge. They're like a giant searchlight.
Yes. And it's and again, it's I just want to point out that the drone-like objects were visible pretty much all the time. It wasn't until like I said, the orbs themselves only in the infrared spectrum cameras, only in night vision, and unless the lights were focused on the orbs,
or if
there was some kind of reflective
or
activity.
if the orbs into the intensity increases, the luminosity increases.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, the thing I find fascinating, gentlemen, I just want to remind people where we are. This is one of the major approach routes for one of the major airports in America, heading towards some of the most intense restricted airspace in the country. This is the approach and exit route from JFK Airport that we're talking about here.
Right.
And what you're filming is something on video that can't be seen with the naked eye. Was it being seen on radar? Were you detecting those objects on radar?
We were getting intermittent targets on radar.
Right. They were very much scattered. The fact that there was so many of them, so many targets, we were able to visualize a little bit more of that. It's they were intermittent returns. We had to use basically a feature on the radar to add some persistence to those scans where we could see them and identify that where they were, their last tracked course.
Now, to bring the relevance of what we're talking about from November 2022 to the present day, do you think there's any difference at all between what you guys have subsequently seen on your own observations in Long Island when you took your observatory down there, your mobile lab, and what you were seeing in 2022?
I don't believe there was much difference at all.
No, I think it was the same. It looked like the same objects to us. Even the videos we had seen lately, it looks quite a few of them look like the same objects.
Right. I mean, it definitely was a swarm. It was a wave of activity that, and up until that point, we hadn't seen on a regular basis like that. Mm-hmm. And to see these other objects that was so persistent, was kind of surprising. Took us back a little bit because we were focused on these other objects, these orb-like objects that we were tracking over that period of time prior to the injection of the drone-like.
So you gentlemen have actually been onto New Jersey, into the area of New Jersey, and done your own research in the last few weeks. What have you seen?
We actually haven't gotten out to New Jersey. We were.
I thought you had. I apologize. No, I'm sorry.
No. We had so many incursions here on the island that at that point it wasn't even necessary for us to go out there.
So just so I'm clear though, and so our audience that maybe don't know where you are relative to where New Jersey is, you're essentially on the same strip of coast. You're just further north.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and we're within about 55 miles of New Jersey, our coastline.
And those New Jersey incursions were occurring throughout the Northeast. It wasn't really just New Jersey.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that really puzzles me about the government and all of the different federal agencies' response to these alleged drone incursions, is that there's been an attempt to play down since Christmas whether or not these incursions are actually happening. It's been suggested by both the FAA, DHS, FBI, and the White House that what people are doing is misidentifying regular aircraft, regular craft for anomalous objects. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that?
It's actually kind of ridiculous because if they check with the each of the state authorities, such as the Orange County Sheriff's Department, they had drone units that were looking at these objects. They were tracking transponder signals. They were sending up their own drones. They were sending up their own helicopters, and they were filming, describing large drone-like objects, the size of small cars, no thermal signatures. They would go dark, had stealth capabilities, and there was several agencies that were describing these things, that local law enforcement agencies. It wasn't just the public.
Gentlemen, are we at the stage yet from your observations where you can venture a speculation as to whether these objects conform to what we describe as having the 5 observables? Are they UAPs in the sense that they are anomalous objects, unidentified anomalous phenomena?
We believe so.
Yeah, I think they're all anomalous. I think they all have to fall under that UAP description, because we haven't identified them yet. We don't know what they are, and they do, based upon the reports that we're seeing and the reports that we're hearing, is that they are exhibiting some of these initial unrecognizable sightings. The unrecognizable signs: thermal camera going dark. Instantaneous velocity. I mean, we're actually seeing some of these things, and we're hearing a lot of reports, especially with people that are around here in the local area of Long Island.
Also, recently, we had gone out there in December and parts of January, and we actually we tried to track some of these objects, and they were very difficult to track on radar. We could track the normal air traffic, but not these drone-like objects. The other thing is, in some cases, they were jamming our radar.
So they were counter-jamming your radar?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was interference patterns that are very specific and indicative of some kind of a jamming frequency or jamming technology.
Now that is fascinating. I mean, that implies either potentially a foreign adversary or something genuinely anomalous.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, by any definition, gentlemen, that's a national security threat, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about objects in an air corridor approaching one of the busiest cities in America. I mean, I'm not trying to overstate the issue, but that's a public safety risk and a national security risk, isn't it?
Especially with the amount of times that they're breaching, they're these the FAA requirements and that sort of thing. It's we have an airport out here, Gabreski Airport, that is not too far from us, that has been breached multiple times. And the last breach actually occurred a week ago, and the sightings. What were the numbers?
There's something like 17 objects, 17 unknown objects or drone-like objects. And not only that, we had breaches at JFK International Airport as well. I think there was 3 incidents over there.
So it's certainly ongoing.
Yeah.
So we've got a situation where the government appears anxious to play down the suggestion that these drones are in any way anomalous. You're seeing and recording evidence that these drones are anomalous. Guys, I know you don't know the answer, but what the hell do you think is going on?
That's a good question. We definitely have a big mystery here.
Exactly, and like I said, the numbers, the sightings have actually increased.
Yeah, we saw quite a few. Even driving to work, this morning I saw it. I thought it was an aircraft coming into Mejugorje Airport, a smaller airport around here, and I saw the blinking lights. The navigation, it looked like navigation lights. They looked a little off, but as it was approaching the airport, it stopped and went backwards. So it made no sense whatsoever. John and I also took the nightcrawler out to a parking field, and we watched an object that stopped for an hour. Stayed stationary in the sky for an hour, then moved, probably at the speed of a small aircraft. But there's no aircraft it stopped for an hour.
No sound, nothing no sound, that you can hear.
So from what you're seeing on the ground, certainly from where you are to the north of New Jersey, there's been no lessening of the sightings of these objects. It's purely and simply that the government's trying to play it down.
Right.
It would seem so.
And the authorities here that they're they just made an announcement. The Suffolk County Sheriff's Department out here had stated that they have incorporated drone detection technologies out at Gabreski Airport, and they're looking to do it with other airports as well on the island, because these incursions are happening so frequently, and even for a number of hours they'll be out there.
Yeah.
The thing I find intriguing about this, gentleman, is the only explanation that we've had, and the government has actually ruled this out as an explanation, is the possibility that it might be some unfriendly foreign adversary deploying these objects off the coast for some unknown reason. I can't think of any plausible reason why Russia, China, North Korea, or any country that has a hostility to the United States would want to show off the capabilities of such technology so overtly with little consequence or any utility to them at all. I mean, what's the purpose of such a show if that's the case?
Yeah, we would agree with that. That's kind of mystifying.
Yeah, and especially the fact
It's like
that
showing your hand. It doesn't
Yes.
really make sense.
and at times they just seem to be loitering back and forth. It doesn't really matter whether it's over an airport; it's just over somebody's home.
Now, the other thing I thought that was very interesting from your analysis of the objects that you've recorded off Long Island is that you've now used high-end calibrated spectrum analyzers, and you've identified two simultaneously occurring pulsed signals during active observations of the anomalous air traffic. So the suggestion there is that they're emitting a narrow pulsed signal at two frequencies. One's at 1.7 gigahertz and the other's at 1.8 gigahertz. What can we conclude from that? Are we saying that these objects are communicating with an external operator on those bands? What does it mean?
Well, here's the thing: the signals are only present when we see a high number of these objects out there, and the amplitude levels of these signals are more than just outliers. They're pretty significant. They don't seem to have any sideband carriers at all. It's sideband information, just more or less very, very intense carriers. The primary beam seems to be about 1.7 gigahertz. Then there's a secondary carrier at 1.8. They're not there all the time. They're very sporadic and they're very difficult to detect. Some of the equipment has to be set for what they call peak mode, where they're looking for those transients or those transitory change.
And this occurred several times when we had these drone-like incursions, and also with the orb. So we're not sure which may be transmitting that signal. Might be the drone-like, but it could be even a type of clock signal to judge this distance between maybe a networked set of objects.
The thing that intrigues me about this, gentlemen, is it's not just you guys reporting this. I mean, I'm talking to people in the FBI, people in private contractors that have worked with this. And the interesting thing is what they're describing are two different types of objects. There's the luminous orbs, the spheroids, if you like, and then there's these weird spinning cubes. And that's one of the most dramatic things that you've captured on this video that you're showing us. It looks to be some kind of spinning cube, which is very interesting because, of course, as you'd recall, Ryan Graves, the F-18 pilot who runs the Americans for Safe Aerospace, he was part of that deployment off the East Coast with a carrier group in 2014, 2015, when they were seeing these weird cube spherical objects.
Right, and that's pretty much what we've been seeing over the past 2 years is some kind of a polyhedron of some sort, rotating polyhedron, and possibly some kind of either some kind of an electric field around it or some kind of a containment around it that looks like a sphere, and that's what we've been like I said, that's what we've been seeing since back 22 in July of 22.
Now, one of the things I found interesting was that you speculated in one recent interview I saw with my friend Matt Ford, that there's red lights and there's blue lights. Can you explain your theory about the significance of those red and blue lights?
Yes. So recently we had got a paper published. It was on gravitational lensing, and we kind of suspected that something was going on around these objects early on in our research, because of the radar anomalies that we've been getting back. It's not just radar; it's GPS. We're having late GPS signals or absence of GPS signals, and with the radar, they seem to be late returns. There's propagation delays, significant propagation delays, and multipath signals. Whenever these objects are within the line of sight of the radome antenna and a reference or an object.
What does that mean? Just explain to a layperson what the significance of that is. You mean the objects are showing mass 1 second and then not showing mass the next?
Yes. So the returns that we're getting back, we're actually looking at that signal chain from the radar dome, And we're looking at two components of it. They call I and Q signals. And from that data, we're able to ascertain that the signals themselves are coming back late. And if they're coming back late, then they're not in the response area of the beam. In other words, the beam itself, with our X-band radar, it rotates around 2.5 seconds. It makes one revolution, and is a 5.2 degree beam at a 360 degree sweep. But what happens is the antenna misses the return because it comes back so late that it catches it on the second and third and fourth rotation. So you get this extensive delay, which is looks like an interference pattern on the radar display.
Okay, so what's causing that interference? I've got a funny feeling you're going to tell me it's gravitational lensing, which of course is impossible.
Yes. So that's what we believe it to be: gravitational lensing and what they call anomalous propagation. Now, this is stuff that's been around since the 1920s. Radio engineers have seen this, quite often, and in some cases, the returns come back seconds, and they should be coming back in nanoseconds.
So what can we conclude? Give this layperson who knows absolutely nothing about gravitational lensing, what does it mean in plain English?
Yeah, so what we're describing here, what we're seeing is in the vicinity of an object that has this anomalous presentation, an orb. In one case, we had a drone-like object, but it's within the line of sight of the radar beam. And what we're using now is using a reference. In our case, we're using large ships out at sea. And if they're 15 to 20 miles away, we use that as a reference. We want the beam to hit the ship, come back as a large return. And if it passes within the path of these objects, the beam itself seems to be distorted and interfered. So you have an interference pattern.
Wow! So you're actually seeing that is a gravitational lensing. Wow!
Yeah. So we believe that it's whatever this object is doing, it's causing propagation delays, and it's causing distortion and multipath signals.
Basically, what we see on our radars, we see if the ship's behind the object, say the object's in front of the ship, the return on where the ship is would seem stretched out. The ship would seem elongated because it's delaying the signal. The other thing is we make it multiple copies of those signals too.
Yeah, straight path interference patterns, and this is something that's been also seen on NextRad with the weather radar. Also, they've been seeing these oddities, these odd patterns.
But to come to the nub of what you're saying, gentlemen, the implications are, if your analysis is correct, that something in that object is distorting gravity.
Exactly.
Yes, that's what we believe.
And we also believe that this is what's also causing the kaleidoscope of color around the object. As the object moves, it rotates towards the observer, it blue shifts. And as it rotates away from the observer, it red shifts. And astronomers have known this, of course, for years, studying large, massive, bodies out in space where, you have these gravitational forces that are causing these effects.
Now, gentlemen, the implications of what you're saying here are very dangerous, because what you appear to be suggesting is that these are not prosaic drones of human construction at all, but something that is manufactured from a technology that is highly advanced, which is capable of distorting gravity.
Right, and this is the kind of thing what we don't see around commercial air traffic.
As far as I know, it hasn't been disclosed yet, but I'm waiting to see with bated breath. As far as I know, there hasn't been any disclosure by the US government yet, but we're working on it, about the possession of any anti-gravity technologies. But the implications of what you're saying are that something or someone is playing with anti-gravity, and that might explain at least some or all of the objects that you're seeing out over the ocean.
Right, and this is what we suspect at this point.
Yeah, strong possibility.
And this affects the whole electromagnetic spectrum, whether it's light, it's radio waves, it's heat. So the same can be said with some of these observations that were made by these Navy pilots. Where you have the some of these presentations with these objects where they seem to be running cold on the outskirt of the object itself. And we're kind of wondering whether or not maybe it's not cold. Maybe it's a gravitational lens that is producing something that looks like a cold atmosphere around the object. it might be distorting that heat signature as well as it does to light and radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gentlemen, as I've announced on the head of this program, this week we will be unveiling a story on NewsNation which explores the very real possibility that the United States is in possession of retrieved non-human craft. We have first-hand whistleblowers who are testifying that they are aware of these extraordinarily advanced technologies that are in the possession of the US government. So it's going to be a very interesting test with evidence such as yours being presented by my two favourite citizen scientists, John and Jerry Tedesco, and their colleague Donna Leonardo. It's going to be a very interesting test for the incoming president, President Trump, to see whether he honours his pledge to tell the public the truth about what's going on with these drones, because he's saying the government knows and they're not letting on what they know. So let's just see what comes out in the next few weeks. John and Jerry, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely.
G'day and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start this week's show, a little bit about this week's sponsor. Dr. Stephen Gundry is sharing his findings about a potential toxin that's in many of the, quote, healthy foods that some scientists push us to eat. They may actually be causing digestive issues for millions of people worldwide. Warning signs including weight gain, fatigue, digestive discomfort and stiff joints, even skin problems. And Dr. Gundry says these signs, these side effects, are often mistaken for normal signs of aging. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. He's put together an informative video you can watch at gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. We're going to link to it below the video, and again, that's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. Okay, now let's get on with the show. G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. So let's go back to a morning mass in May of 2014, and Pope Francis states, quote, "If an expedition of Martians arrives and some of them come to us, and if one of them says, 'Me, I want to be baptized,' what would happen?" It begs the question, what does the leader of the most powerful church in the world think and know about UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena? Well, our guest today thinks he may have some of those answers. A computer programmer by profession, Gabriel Piedra has a doctorate in theology from the Spain-based Teológica Servi y Salud, the Theological Commission for Service and Health, and he also has some scientific training. He's qualified in plant-based nutrition from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies at Cornell University in the US, and he's made a study of molecular biology. Gabriel's new book delves into an issue I've heard some about, but not a lot of hard detail: the Vatican's interest in UFOs and anomalous phenomena, and in particular what Gabriel reveals about the current Pope Francis's strong connections to and apparently intense interest in unidentified anomalous phenomena. His book is entitled A New Civilization: The Hidden History of the Catholic, Freemasonry and Non-Human Intelligence, and the story of Jorge Mario Bergoglio before he ascended to becoming Pope Francis is absolutely extraordinary, to say the least. And Gabriel has the details. So you might be thinking, why would we take an interest in what the Vatican and its leadership think about the UAP mystery, about the possibility of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet? Well, it matters because there are as many as 1.4 billion baptized Catholics on this planet, a huge proportion of humanity. Catholicism is the largest branch of Christianity. It's also an extraordinarily powerful and influential soft power multinational bureaucracy with enormous spiritual and moral influence on many countries worldwide. As we'll hear today, it has its own diplomatic and intelligence service worldwide, and at the heart of this church is the Pope, Pope Francis, regarded by followers as the earthly vicar of Christ, Christ's representative on earth. Gabrielle, welcome to Reality Check. You say in your book that the Vatican's had an interest in the subject of UAP and its occupants for a long time, particularly during the papacy of Francis. It's believed that the phenomenon, you say, is behind every religion and that it comes from God, and that in this matter the Vatican is trying to prepare the world for a future revelation. Where's your evidence for that, my friend?
Well, first of all, Ross, thank you for having me here today. Well, in reality, the evidence is very deep and it's very good because it's true that there have been popes that they have said something about the subject. For example, John Paul II, many years ago, he said something, but not publicly exactly. But regarding popes, Pope Francis is the first pope that has been very open, at least when he was in Argentina, about this subject. Well, to begin with, we can say, for example, that he was a disciple of Benito II Reina. He was a Jesuit priest, and he was an astronomer also in Argentina. He was a disciple of Bergoglio. At the beginning, Bergoglio didn't like so much about his hobbies with extraterrestrial intelligence and flying discs and all of that. But after some time, he changed his mind. I think that it was like 1988 when he began to change his mind about the subject.
So you're saying that the current Pope has taken an interest, a very close interest, in UAPs, in unidentified anomalous phenomena through this particular mentor of his in Argentina.
Exactly. It's not a small interest, it's a very big interest. In fact, we can say that is almost central in his papacy, because before becoming Pope, he knew in some way that he had to become Pope, because there was a meeting in 1988 and in a home of a person, there were two ufologists, very well-known ufologists in Argentina. One of them was Pedro Romaniuk, that we can talk a little more in some minutes or something like that. But the other one was Acoglanis, Angel Cristo Acoglanis. They became friends of Bergoglio, and they were in a house. They were talking about extraterrestrial intelligence, life after death, and some other topics. And Acoglanis used to say that he had contacts with light beings or extraterrestrials. And he also said that he received some prophecies. One of those prophecies was, and he said to Bergoglio that day in that house, "You are going to become Pope one day." But Bergoglio said something like, "Stop bothering me, because I don't believe you." After that, Acoglanis turned his face to Romaniuk and he told him, he doesn't believe me that he's going to be Pope one day.
So you actually, sorry, I got to get this right. So there was a prophecy from this guy who I think is Angel Cristo Acoglanis.
Exactly.
And this was at the home of Pedro Romaniuk. They're two Argentinian ufologists. And Acoglanis claimed to be channeling a message from extraterrestrials that Jorge Bergoglio was going to become the Pope. And that's in 1988. That's many, many years before he became Pope.
Exactly. And there are two reasons because of that. First, because Acoglanis said that his contacts were not just but mainly from Uritorco Mountain. There is a hotspot in Argentina, very well known for many ufologists, even in the US. Uritorco Mountain, many people have seen lights, flying discs. They have had communications with beings that they say that they are living inside a mountain, and Akoglanis used to say that he had contacts with those beings in that mountain. The other thing is that Bergoglio was changing his mind about the Catholic Church because he was very conservative. But after that, he began to change his mind about a lot of topics. So he became to be open about the extraterrestrial intelligence, the possibility that that could be real.
So when you say that Bergoglio was hanging out, if you like, with Akoglanis and Romaniuk, are you sure he wasn't just a sort of an incidental guest at their home? You're suggesting that he was actually actively involved and interested in the UAP, UFO subject with these gentlemen?
Well, what we know so far until now is this, that I think that from the 1990 something like that, he was very involved, mainly with Pedro Romaniuk because Angel Cristo Akoglanis was assassinated some years after 1988, after that meeting. I don't know if that meeting in 1988 was a casual meeting, like I want to learn something, but I don't know what to believe. But after some years, Bergoglio, the actual Pope Francis, he became very involved in the subject. In fact, he became to believe that the phenomenon was real and that extraterrestrial intelligences were visiting planet Earth.
Wow, that's a big call. So the current Pope is a tinfoil hatter.
Many people can say that. Yes, it's true. It's true. It's true. But what I say to the people is, yes, he can believe that. But you cannot say it's craziness because if you don't know his experiences, because there are a lot of sources that know firsthand about all this thinking, about all this subject regarding Pope Francis and alien life.
So can we roll back a bit? I'm fascinated with what you say in your book about the history of the Catholic Church's engagement with the UAP mystery. And I guess a good starting point is my friend and colleague, Professor Diana Walsh-Pasulka, who's written two excellent books. One is American Cosmic and the other is Encounters. And both of them touch on the fact that the Vatican is taking an extremely close interest in UAPs. And my understanding from Diana is that she's been given some access to some of the Vatican archives on this stuff. It's quite clear, isn't it, Gabriel, that the Vatican is taking a much closer interest in the phenomenon of unidentified anomalous objects, whatever they are, than previous papacies. There seems to have been, if you like, a ramping up of awareness about the issue. There have been a number of meetings where there have been conferences held about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. What do we know about what the Vatican says about the possibility of a non-human intelligence?
Well, what we can say is this, because I know that the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, they have a big interest in this because that is public. But at the same time, there are some sources that I cannot name, but those sources have told me that inside that branch of the Vatican, there is a big interest about the subject. Okay. They take some testimonies around the world, and after that, the Jesuit priests, some Jesuit priests in the Vatican, take that information, and that information goes to Pope Francis to analyze that information about maybe those cases are real or maybe not. But he has taken seriously what that branch of the Vatican is saying about the subject, given that Pope Francis is very involved about the subject. And there is much, much more about what happened in Argentina with him and the subject. Indeed.
I'll get to that detail, but I want to get a bit of the history. So Diana Walsh-Pasulka, the professor from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, she's made a study of supernatural events in the Catholic Church, and she tells the story of a nun in the late 1800s who was woken by a glowing orb hovering above her head in her bedroom. And this was also witnessed, apparently, by the Mother Superior of the nunnery. And apparently they decided at the time that it was a lost soul who was searching for purgatory, for release from purgatory. But this idea of balls of flaming light whatever you think about the truth or the veracity of that particular account, it does mesh with a lot of the accounts that we hear from UAP experiences today. Is it possible that religious explanations for the phenomenon are merely encounters with a non-human intelligence, do you believe?
Absolutely. And for example, just briefly, because for example, we can talk about the divergent apparitions in Garabandal in Spain in the 1960s. The other ones were in Mejugorje. Okay, in Mejugorje, those those apparitions began in the 1980s. So it was not just the Virgin Mary, but orbs, light orbs.
So when you're talking about Spain, I don't know that one. I do know about Fatima, the Fatima incident in 1917, which was three children seeing allegedly the Virgin Mary appearing to them, intriguingly as a small, quite squat 4 or 5 foot figure. But these children, described what was obviously for them a deeply spiritual experience, and it's become almost a religious shrine in Portugal. Talk me through those incidents, Medjugorje, Spain, and Fatima in Portugal.
Well, beginning with Fatima, the official explanation is something very different about what is in the archives. Fina Darmada and Joaquin Fernandez, they made a very good research because they went to the original archives in Fatima. So theirs was a 25 years investigation into the archives and in newspapers from the time. And for example, there was a kind of prophecy from some people, like they were shamans or something like that. Okay. And they said that on May 13, on 1917, there was going to happen something big. They were not Catholic. They were just talking with the spirits or something like that, what they said. And that was published in newspapers in Portugal. So on May 13, there was an apparition. Okay, but what the archive said is that the three children were in the landscape taking care of the chips. Suddenly, there was like a big ball in the air. It was hovering. Now, that big ball in the air was projecting a figure of a lady. And that lady began to talk to them, but she never told them, I am Mary. She was just the lady. That was all. Talking about saying that it was the Virgin Mary, that was a change that became after that. But that is not from the mouths of the witnesses. Okay.
So the more accurate, to make your point, the more accurate version of the story from the people who've done the first-hand research is that essentially it equates more appropriately with what you and I might call UAPs, some kind of sphere, some kind of glowing sphere.
Exactly. In fact, in the last apparition that was October 13 of 1917, talking about the miracle of the sun, what the witnesses say, what they said was that there was like a disc. That disc was hovering over them. There was smoke behind that disc. Some people said that there were occupants in that disc, that they were saying hello. Some people, maybe because for their background, they were saying that was Christ, the Father, and the Virgin Mary, that they were waving and saying hello or something like that. But that was the case. In fact, if we go to the website of Fatima, if you are going to look to the photographs, there is a photograph. You can see that disc flying above the people, and you can see the trail of the smoke that goes like this and like this.
How sure are we about the authenticity of that photograph? If it is a reliable photograph, we'll show it here. But has the authenticity of that photograph been challenged at all?
No, never. And I think that one of the best evidences is that they have that same photograph in their website. I don't know after this interview if that photograph is going to continue there, but until today that photograph is there.
See, I've never heard this before. So I was always told that Fatima was the vision of the Virgin Mary appearing to three beautiful little children who had a religious exaltation experience. And essentially it was reinforcing, obviously, the belief in Catholicism. What you're suggesting is almost heretical. It basically seems to be suggesting that there's a non-human intelligence that might have been engaging with humanity at that incident, and that it's been mistaken or misused to represent the Catholic tradition.
Yes, well, what I can say is this, because something very different is the people that made the changes and the rest of the world, and even the rest of the Catholic Church, because when you see when the changes began, those changes began when Lucia, the last survivor of the witnesses, she began to talk with the Jesuits, and in very definite dates, the changes became. All that investigation is in the book of Fina de Armada and Joaquin Fernandez. It's a very good research. But there were Jesuits in other parts of the world that they were confronting those Jesuits in Portugal, because they were saying, oh, no, this is very strange because there is something else. So that doesn't mean that the whole Catholic Church or that the whole Jesuit order knows about what is behind all of this.
Can I ask you, before we leave the Fatima story, again, I only have the most limited knowledge and experience of this story, but I've always heard about the three secrets of Fatima, and there's always been this dark rumour that the third secret, which apparently has been released, hasn't been released in totality. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories in the UAP research world suggesting that the third secret of Fatima has a link to the UAP subject. Do you give that, with your research, any credibility at all, Gabriel?
No. And the reason is this, because when you see the research, I know that what I'm going to say is very controversial, but if you see that book, it is very evident that all those secrets were an invention, okay? Because Lucia, in the original archives, Lucia always said the whole thing that the lady said was just some very small words, just a small phrase. That was all. But after the apparitions, some years after the apparitions, when she became in contact with the Jesuits, okay, those small words was a big secret. After some years, a second secret. Now the third secret was announced. I don't remember that it was in 1947 that was said that there was a third secret. But I think that the secrets had the intention to defend orthodoxy. So if that was the original intention, to defend orthodoxy, I don't think that there was an invention about that there is a third secret hidden with extraterrestrial intelligence that is going to be revealed one day or something like that.
So you don't give that any credence at all, that suggestion?
No, I am open to the possibility, but given the evidence, I don't believe it very much.
Okay, so let's talk about because I find all these incidents interesting, because I'm not suggesting ill intent. What I am suggesting is that obviously there are people of deep religious faith who've interpreted these events through their own prism of their deep religiosity. And I guess it's interesting to know there's Fatima, then there's the one in Spain. Let's take us to Spain and then we'll talk to Mejugorje. What happened in Spain?
Okay, in Spain, in Garabandal, Spain, in the north of Spain, there were two little girls that they were in one of the mountains in Garabandal. It's a very small and very precious town in Garabandal. And they said in the 1960s that the Virgin Mary appeared to them in the pine trees that are in that mountain in Garabandal. Now, the very interesting thing about this apparition, that is very strange for me, because in that apparition, she actually said that she was Virgin Mary. Okay, that's very clear about that. She even talked to them about the Second Vatican Council that was in those days in the Vatican also. So, but there are some things, because many people say that in Garabandal and in the north of Spain, a lot of lights and ball of lights are seen in the skies of Garabandal. And there were two occasions, for example, in the diary of the main witness, okay, she said that she saw like a light flying very fast in the sky. And after that, the Virgin appeared in the pine trees. Now, there was another occasion, because there was like a big sphere that was besides Virgin Mary in one of the apparitions. And one of the girls asked to the Virgin Mary, "Dear lady, what is that?" And she said to them, "That is the vehicle that I used to come here." Okay,
Wow.
is very interesting, but
Do you find it you obviously find this a more plausible account than the claims about the three secrets of Fatima? Why do you find it more plausible?
first, because it's more actual. There are videos, and the witnesses, I don't know if all of them or three of them, they are alive, and they have talked about those testimonies. So that's direct testimonies of people that are alive even to this day.
So again, do you think that that is evidence? I mean, I guess what I'm asking for here is, do you think that there is a connection between what we all refer to as a non-human intelligence and what the world religions, including Catholicism and Christianity, would describe as, you know, the fundamental tenets of Christianity, a belief in God, Jesus, Virgin Mary? I mean, is that what you're suggesting?
Not exactly, because that's going to depend on the interpretation, but I think that much more research is needed, because, for example, many people can say extraterrestrials because they are angels and they are not from here. So you can say that they are extraterrestrial intelligence because they are not from here. But some people can say those are beings from other planets. Okay? But the other thing is, for example, the other interpretation can be like this, because many people in Garabandal and many researchers have went there, and there are places that are really old, that there was a very ancient culture there, where they used to say that there were the gods of the heavens that came here to the earth, even in Garabandal, and those lights were seen. So some people can say maybe there is a force behind those apparitions that say, I am the Virgin Mary, but in reality, I am not. But that's going to depend on the research.
Let me be a hard-nosed, skeptical, debunking cynic for a moment, Gabriel. Isn't it possible that there are people in the church, not of good intention, who are seeking to manipulate a perfectly natural phenomenon, or at least something anomalous that has been occurring long before perhaps even Christianity first appeared on this planet, who are manipulating that phenomena for the purposes of underlining the significance of their own religion?
Yes, I think so. And we can say that that's not the fault of all the people or all the clerics in that religion. That is going to depend of people that are in the know, that maybe they know a lot more, but they are thinking, I'm going to say this. What I think, Ross, is this is I am not against religion. I am not against that. I am not against believing in God. But I think that we don't have to fear about find the truth. It's much better to find the truth and to see what is behind and what that can tell us to us.
And so what do you think is Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio's view on what you just said? Do you think he's interested in finding the truth, even if it does perhaps undermine some of the more orthodox ideas behind Catholicism?
Well, that's a hard question in some way, and I really don't know. My suspicion is that he knows a lot about this connection. What is his interpretation about that connection, that some of them are of satanic origin, some of them are angels, some of them are extraterrestrial in the sense that they are from other planets? I really don't know, but I suspect very much, because for some other information that I have, that he knows very well that connection with the antiquity and the spheres and ladies and all those things.
One of the things that fascinated me from Diana Walsh-Pasulka's research was that there are accounts in the Catholic literature of objects doing very similar things to what we would describe as UFOs. For example, people describe balls or luminous beings descending from the sky or passing through walls. These beings terrorize, poke, and prod people with a dart-like instrument, assaulting them with a peculiar light and leaving them utterly transformed. And you cite the example of Saint Teresa of Avila, who was a 16th century nun. And then there's a more contemporary account that's told in John Mack's book about a chap called Edward Carlos, which is told in John Mack's book Abduction. Can you talk about those two events and talk about the parallels, please?
Well, if I remember well regarding the parallels, because for example, about the first witness that you told me, she used to say that there was like a sphere in her room.
This is Saint Teresa of Avila in the 16th century, yes?
Saint Teresa of Avila, exactly. She said that there was like a sphere that was in her room, okay, that was visiting, but she was very scared about that. So she didn't know what to do about that, and she talked with her superior, and her superior went to her room, and she herself saw that ball of light, or that sphere coming into her room. So what I remember was that her interpretation was something like, that was a spirit. Maybe that was a spirit, okay? Because that's the Catholic thinking. Now, regarding Dr. John Mack, he saw some parallels, some things that were similar to that. If you can refresh me something about John Mack, about that episode of John Mack.
Okay. It was a guy, I think it was a chap called Edward Carlos, who essentially
Yes.
described a very similar situation of a luminous being appearing in his bedroom.
Oh, yes. A luminous being that was there. Now, the other thing that I remember, for example, is that sometimes those beings are inside of a light sphere. After that, they are not in that sphere because they go outside of that sphere. So it's very similar because it's luminous, like in the first case.
So I want to come back to Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Pope, before he became Pope. But before we do, I want you to quickly finish this series of explanations you're giving me about these great religious miracle events that have occurred in recent modern history. And the other one, of course, is Mejugorje. What happened at Mejugorje?
Okay, regarding Mejugorje, those apparitions were in the 1980s, okay, in Croatia. And those apparitions were in a mountain. Now, there were some witnesses that they used to say that there were light spheres hovering when those apparitions of the Virgin Mary were actually occurring all those days. But there are even witnesses not exactly related with the moment of the apparitions, but close to the mountain in Mejugorje. Some people used to say that they saw like a flying disc or a spaceship, really, really big. Now, the other thing that for me is very impressive that is mountains. Okay, in the case of Garabandal, it was a mountain. In the case of Mejugorje, it was a mountain. And there are many apparitions, even in the antiquity. In Canaan, for example, in the Middle East, they used to worship their gods, not only, but in the top of the mountains. And the ladies appear there. It is very similar. Even light spheres that were appearing in those moments.
So give me your analysis. What does this all mean, Gabriel? What are the implications? If three of the great Catholic religious miracles all have anomalous disk objects or glowing orb objects, are we suggesting that the Catholic Church has perhaps appropriated, for the purposes of convincing the faithful, these incidents that are in fact UAP incidents? Or are we suggesting that the UAPs are perhaps evidence that the Catholics might be right? Where do you stand? I mean, are you a man of faith? What's your position on this?
I am a man of faith. Yes, I believe in God. I believe in intelligent design. I know that there are a lot of things that are not very useful to explain intelligent designs when we talk about sciences, but I think that there is very good evidence that points about that. Regarding the Catholic Church, what I can say is this: I cannot talk about what I don't know in this way. Okay, the people that know all these connections, about those people are some of those people that know all these connections talking publicly in the name of the Vatican, giving their own interpretation. I don't know, because I don't know. Maybe, but I don't know. Now, regarding the origin, what I can say, because it's a long story, but I just can say this at least. I think that the best place, maybe I can be wrong, but the best place to begin to analyze the origin is Eridu. Eridu in Mesopotamia. Eridu is the best place to begin, I think.
So what came first? Was the religion an explanation for the phenomenon, or is the phenomenon a manifestation of the religion?
No, I think that is the first option.
So essentially, religion is perhaps our attempt to try to explain a phenomenon that has always been here, you're saying?
Well, what I think is that the phenomenon has been here from millennia. Now, I think that the phenomenon can give their names. My name is this and this and this in this culture and in this other culture and on some others. Now, are there cases where some of those people said, I'm going to decide to put this name? We really don't know, but maybe we can do a kind of mix with the theory of Jacques Vallée. Because, for example, in Messengers of Deception, there is a very well book, for example.
So Jacques Vallée is one of the most prominent UFO researchers and commentators. He's an elderly gentleman and probably the foremost researcher and commentator.
Exactly. And Jacques Vallée talks a lot. He's not the only one, but I think that he was the first to talk about that. He talked about the religions of the past where the phenomenon was present. And I think that the phenomenon has given origin to the religion. Okay? Now, regarding people that may say, but there are some things, there are some practices that are craziness. What I can just say is this, because Jacques Vallée sometimes he said, for example, in Messengers of Deception, that the phenomenon many times works in a kind of funny way, like very absurd. Okay,
the trickster phenomenon.
Exactly, and maybe that was the case in the past. That maybe we can say it's ridiculous in Egypt or in Mesopotamia or in Canaan, in Japan, etc. It's very crazy, but if we know that the phenomenon is real, we cannot say that it's craziness in the sense that that was a human invention. That could very well became from non-human intelligence. With which purposes, we really don't know for sure.
So let's go back to Argentina. And in the period we're talking about, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the future Pope Francis, is a cardinal. And so he's a very senior member of the Catholic Church. But your evidence that you've got in your book suggests that there are multiple witnesses who say that even while he was a cardinal, Bergoglio was attending functions at the home of noted ufologists in Argentina and clearly taking a very, very close interest in the phenomenon.
Yes, exactly. And I talked at least with four witnesses from Argentina. And there have been other people that have talked with some other witnesses that I even don't know. The story is this, that not just, but from the 2000s, Bergoglio used to go to Pedro Romaniuk's house. Pedro Romaniuk was a disciple of Benjamin Solari Parravicini. He
Paravicini.
was exactly. He died in 1974, and he was Catholic. And he said that in 1961 he was abducted in Buenos Aires.
By aliens.
Exactly. And he was traveling in a UFO. So after some hours, he came back to the same place in Buenos Aires. But even before that, he had apparitions of Catholic saints, apparitions of goblins and fairies and all those things.
So forgive me for interrupting here, Gabriel, but I just want our audience to be clear on this. So whatever we think of the veracity, of the authenticity or the truth of the allegations made by people like Paravicini or Romaniuk, the point that you're making is that these were mentors to Bergoglio before he became Pope. And Bergoglio, as a cardinal, was engaging with these people extremely closely.
Exactly. Well, what I know is that Bergoglio, he didn't know personally Benjamin Solari Parravicini. He didn't know him personally, but he knew in person Pedro Romaniuk. And Pedro Romaniuk was disciple of Parravicini. And Parravicini used to make a lot of drawings regarding prophecies, something that were going to happen in the future in Argentina, in the world, in the Catholic Church. The coming of a new pope that was going to come with very new ideas, going to the streets to help the poor and all those things. And actually, that prophecy is something that Pope Francis is recommending to the people to do until this day. And when he was in Pedro Romaniuk's house, they used to chat a lot with people from the artistic world in Argentina, politicians like Elisa Carrió, that she is a congresswoman. She was one of the presents in those meetings. And in those meetings, they used to talk the whole night, many times. They used to talk about three subjects: extraterrestrial intelligence, that they were visiting the Earth, Benjamin Solari Parravicini prophecies, the future of the Catholic Church, and life after death.
So your point is that this is not an idle interest by Cardinal Bergoglio, as he was at the time. This was an intense interest. He was very closely engaged with the UAP mystery.
Yes, he was very deep in that.
Mm-hmm. So there's another person you talk about who's described as a spiritual advisor to Pope Francis, Eduardo Dentino. And you make the point that he's posted some amazing claims on Facebook about what he describes as a universal energy, frequencies and waves that permeate everything. He talks openly about human capabilities yet to be discovered, such as remote viewing, psychokinesis, and other supposed psychic abilities. Are you suggesting that the Pope himself is perhaps interested and engaged with those subjects as well? Because we're now steering into what I'm sure a lot of debunkers and skeptics would describe as the wacky and the crazy.
Yes, exactly. Well, two things regarding that statement. First, Eduardo Dentino, he was close to Pedro Romaniuk. Okay? And Pedro Romaniuk, he had a place called Fisi in Argentina. And that was a place to make contact. Well, is a place because that place is today in Virrey del Pino in Buenos Aires in Argentina. Okay, they are Some of them are Catholics. They believe in the Virgin Mary, but they also believe in extraterrestrial intelligence, and they talk also about remote viewing. And Eduardo Dentino knew Pedro Romaniuk, and I know because I talked with a source about that Jorge Bergoglio believe about these things like remote viewing and psychokinesis.
Now, the thing I find intriguing about the Fici site, the Romaniac location, is that it's also said in your book that Pedro Romaniac spoke of Jesus as, quote, chief of the celestial teachers of the extraterrestrials. So Romaniac was actually of the belief that Jesus is an alien.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what, sorry, and forgive me for dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and that's what Romaniac has suggested as a mentor to Bergoglio, now Pope Francis.
Exactly. Well, regarding that he's an extraterrestrial, maybe not in the sense that is created. Maybe yes, maybe not. But the thing is that Pedro Romaniuk, he wrote some books, and for example, he wrote that Jesus is the master of the universe, and he's going to come back in the second coming with all these extraterrestrial beings to save the earth. There, in 2018, I was in a meeting here in Costa Rica, and one of the best friends of Pope Francis was here, and he gave a very interesting theme, and he said something about the gods of the other cultures that are in heaven, but the main of them is Jesus, and I was present there personally.
So let me be clear about this, Gabriel. A lot of what we're discussing here would be heretical to a lot of the Orthodox people inside the Catholic Church. And it's not fair to say that Pope Francis's views, if in fact he subscribes to these views, would be the general view of people in the Catholic Church, is it? It would be quite on the fringe to suggest that these ideas are in any way the accepted view.
Exactly. And what I recommend to the people is this, okay? Because, for example, disinformation is not so secret, but what I can say to the people that do not know about this, okay, they don't know the other thoughts that he has in mind about the subject. What I can say is that he's very open. And I think that the people need to give him the opportunity. In the future, I don't know, to know what he thinks about the subject, because there is a lot of evidence that says that the phenomenon is real.
Now, this is where I want to make a segue with the fact that Bergoglio is, as I understand it, a Jesuit in his background in the Catholic Church. And I think you need to explain the significance of the role that the Jesuit faith, if you like, inside the Catholic Church has played. They're very progressive. And I think it's particularly significant in relation to the Fatima series of incidents, the sightings by people in the Fatima location in Portugal. There's been a very big attempt by the Jesuit arm of the Catholic Church to reconcile with the Freemasons. What was it in history that happened in Portugal that led to a conflict between the Catholic Church and the Freemasons?
Well, what I want to be clear is about this, because I know that a lot of people is going to see craziness and conspiracy theory. I am very much against conspiracy theories, but this is not conspiracy theory. Is history, because Freemasonry always has been about progressiveness. Now, the very Catholic Church used to be very conservative. So when they were in Portugal in the 1910 until 1917, and after that year, they began to take control of the government in some degree. So they were very much against the Catholic Church because they didn't like the union about church and state, because the Freemasons are about that you have to be free to worship God as you want to believe it. So, but there was a kind of war about that in Portugal. And after that, in the middle of that war, the apparitions of Fatima became to happen.
So Fatima started around 1917, 1917, didn't they? What happened? What was the reaction of the Freemasons, who were slowly gaining power in Portugal, to the claims that were being made by the Catholic Church about these apparitions at Fatima?
They were that the children were lying, and that was an operation from the Catholic Church in order to recover its power in Portugal. That was a total invention, but that was an invention because the evidence is very hard.
And so where does Pope Francis stand? Because there's been this, I mean, as I understand it, it's still proscribed officially by the Catholic Church that you can't be a Catholic and a Freemason, that Freemasonry is incompatible with the Catholic faith. Is that still the case?
More or less, we can say. Why? Because, for example, November last year, Pope Francis signed a document that was stating what we knew from 1983 from Cardinal Ratzinger, the past Pope Benedict XVI, that Freemasonry was not allowed in the Catholic Church, that no Catholic can be a member of the Freemasonry society or the order. But it's a kind of contradictory, but because when you see in years past, Pope Francis was very welcome with some of the Freemasons from France. And he has been very, very open with the Freemasons in Austria also. And in fact, I had some communication some years ago with one of the persons in charge in the Freemasonry in Austria, and he stated to me that the conversations with the Vatican were very well with Pope Francis.
So just explain that to me then. Why would Pope Francis be seeking a rapprochement, as you suggest, with Freemasonry? What's Pope Francis's position on Freemasonry? And this is where we get into the sensitivity you have about being accused of pushing a conspiracy theory. What is it that you know, Gabriel, about Pope Francis and Freemasonry?
Well, I have 3 or 4 testimonies. For example, when I told you that in 1988 he was more open about some other conversations like extraterrestrial intelligence because he used to be very conservative. Some people say that in those years, 1988, 1992, something like that, he was in contact with Freemasonry and he became a Freemason himself.
You're suggesting the Pope is a secret Freemason in defiance of the Vatican's own rules on Freemasonry?
Well, I have the original recording, an audio recording of a phone conversation with that they are talking about some Iranian representatives in Argentina. They are talking about a conversation that one of them had with the Vatican intelligence representative in Argentina. And he said to them, to this Iranian person, that he said that he was a Freemason. And
so I just want to, before you go any further, I think we should explain this to our audience because it's in danger of getting complicated. And I think this is a really interesting point. So in what period, when was this attack? There was a terror attack in 1994. There was an attack on an Argentinian-Israeli Mutual Association building in Buenos Aires that killed 85 people and injured hundreds of people. And in 2006, Argentinian prosecutors accused Iran of directing the bombing carried out by Hezbollah. And it has come out, including in some of the more prominent newspapers in Argentina, that a former senior official with Argentina's intelligence service, Juan Bautista Joffre, also a former ambassador, told an Argentine TV show that when they were investigating an Iranian-sponsored terror attack on Argentinian soil, they listened to a wiretap between Yusuf Khalil and Abdul Karim Paz. This was reported in the La Nación newspaper, which is one of the top newspapers in Argentina. And Yusuf told Karim that he had met the head of the Vatican intelligence services in Argentina, a guy called Hector Luis Yeremia, and they'd agreed to introduce him to the head of Vatican intelligence. The Vatican intelligence chief in Argentina told Yusuf he was a Freemason, and so was Pope Francis. So you've listened to that recording and you've verified that that's what was said. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. It is a phone recording of 8 minutes because when Joffrey said that on television, okay, I know that he's very serious doing investigations about all these things. But I was thinking I need to listen to the recording. And I got access to the recording and I listened the whole recording. And he said that Pope Francis is a Freemason.
You've also cited in your book how in 2013, Angel Jorge Clavero, the then Grand Master of the Argentine Grand Lodge, which is a Freemasonry lodge, told one of the top newspapers in Argentina that although there's not a fluid relationship between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, of which of course Pope Francis is one, are the closest sector from Catholicism. And he pointed out, quote, "There have even been Jesuits who, with the permission of their priors or provincials, have belonged to Freemasonry." So that's a very big hint from the Argentine Freemason lodge that the Pope or people close to him may in fact be linked to Freemasonry.
Yes, exactly. And I think this because Freemasonry was very much against the Jesuit order, mainly in the 16th century. Not just, but mainly in the 16th century. And with the Jesuits was the same case. They were very much against Freemasonry. And the Holy Alliance, that was the name of the Vatican Intelligence Service at that time, the most of the intelligence agents from the Vatican in centuries past were Jesuits, most of them. And Freemasonry was very much against that. But after some time, they became more or less more friends.
Now, Gabriel, why does this matter? It matters to me journalistically because I'm fascinated by the links that my friend and informant David Grush suggested to me in an interview last year with NewsNation, where he pointed to the Vatican's alleged role in the purported transfer of non-human technology, an alien spacecraft no less. In 1933 it crashed in Magenta, was held by the fascists under Mussolini, seen by the Nazis, but eventually covertly handed over to the Americans, alleges David Grush, in about 1944. And this suggestion of a secret history with NHI technology, a knowledge of non-human intelligence by the Vatican, it certainly sits well with what you're saying about Pope Francis's interest in the subject.
Exactly. And look, you told me before that the Jesuits are very progressive, if the most progressive branch in the Catholic Church. All of them, or almost all of them, have PhDs. I know some of them personally. They are very good people. I know them very well, and they are very open about all this subject. And I can tell you something more because, for example, when David Grush said that Pope Pius XII helped the US with that object, okay, the main advisor of Pope Pius XII was a German Jesuit, and he was the head of the entity, the Vatican Intelligence Service at that time. I said that it was called the Holy Alliance, but in 1936, according to Spanish-Peruvian journalist Eric Frattini, the name of the Vatican Intelligence Service changed in 1936 to the name was the entity. Until this day is the entity. Now, that main advisor of Pope Pius XII, that he was a Jesuit, a German Jesuit. He also was the head of the entity at that time, and he also had contacts with the FBI in the US and some agencies. So I see very easy that maybe it was through him, maybe, that Pope Francis helped the US to took that device to that country.
I also find it fascinating, and this is neither here nor there, but Jesus James Angleton, who went on to become the CIA's head of counterintelligence, as luck would have it, serendipity dictates he happened to be living and based for the OSS at the time, the American equivalent of the CIA at the time, in Milan, in northern Italy, very close to Magenta.
Exactly. And take into account this, because James Jesus Angleton, during Second World War and after that, he had intelligence contacts in the Vatican. Okay, during Second World War, because of Nazi Germany invading Europe. Okay, it was not because they liked each other very much, but was by convenience. Okay, because they had some enemies in common, and after that, they cooperated in Italy, James Jesus Angleton in Italy with Pope Pius XII after Second World War, and close to Magenta, and this German advisor of Pope Francis. I think that it's a very good possibility that worked in that way.
So let's bring this even further into the present day, because one of the things that just hit me like a brick when I was doing my research was the incontrovertible evidence, literally the emails of John Podesta, who was at the time a senior advisor to President Obama, based in the White House. And they were leaked by the Russians. Incredible. It was a GRU disinformation operation. They were leaked to WikiLeaks and posted online. They don't seem to be online at the moment. Somebody keeps on taking them down. But what they reveal is that John Podesta was being approached, among other things, by Edgar Mitchell, the former Apollo 11 astronaut. And Edgar Mitchell had sent an email to Podesta in January 2015 claiming that the Catholic Church knows all about an extraterrestrial intelligence engaging with planet Earth. And it made much of the fact that the Vatican had hosted global seminars of the repercussions of humans interacting with ETI and how this will affect religion and consciousness. Do you believe Edgar Mitchell's claims that the Vatican is essentially preparing humanity for the inevitable moment when we're told about the existence of a non-human intelligence?
Well, I think that the answer is yes, because, like I told you, the Vatican Intelligence Service is very behind in this topic. Now, the other thing is that in those emails, one of the persons that Dr. Edgar Mitchell was trying to contact with John Podesta was through a friend, and that friend is Terence Mansfield, and that was revealed in WikiLeaks. And she wrote to John Podesta about the possibility to talk with Dr. Edgar Mitchell about disclosure in the US about the extraterrestrial intelligence, and also to talk to John Podesta about what the Vatican knows about extraterrestrial intelligence, because in the past, the Vatican used to share some important information about this with other countries, but those emails doesn't name which countries the Vatican shared that information.
I find it intriguing. Those WikiLeaks emails are probably the most overlooked bit of evidence to show that there was very clearly, prior to the 2016 presidential election, there was very clearly negotiations underway between senior generals in the Pentagon, a senior member of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, Robert Weiss, and John Podesta, in apparent contemplation of a Hillary Clinton victory. There was clearly a contemplation that there would be some kind of controlled disclosure about non-human intelligence in 2017 by President Hillary Clinton. You have to wonder sometimes what would have happened if history had gone that way in 2017.
Yes, exactly, because one thing that is very interesting to me is this, and I am not saying, oh, I believe this. No, no, no. It's just that it's very interesting. Why right now, in this moment, when in the US there are happening a lot of things about this subject, trying to reveal what the US government knows, why exactly this Pope is in this moment? The Pope more open about this subject because take into account that after that, John Podesta was seen in Italy eating in a restaurant with a Freemason that had access in the Vatican. That Freemason was in contact with the head of the Vatican Observatory at that time, Jose Gabriel Funes.
And what did Father Funes say? Please remind our audience what Father Funes said about the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence.
I don't know if this was with some purpose, but that announcement was in May 13 of 2008 or 2009. I digress about the year, but 2008 or 2009. I think it was in 2008. The thing it was that he said in public television that extraterrestrial intelligence, that was a very strong possibility and that do not contradict the Catholic faith. Now take into account this because before Pope Francis became Pope, Jose Gabriel Funes and Bergoglio knew each other for many years in Argentina. Now, in 2016, they are working all of this, and that Freemason was in contact with Jose Gabriel Funes, and Jose Gabriel Funes and this Freemason used to help each other to open the door for going to some meetings in Russia to talk about extraterrestrial intelligence. There were people from US, Freemasons, from China, from Israel, and they used to talk about the possibility about all of this that maybe is in the scriptures, in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, in the Holy Bible. So they used to talk about this, and even they talked in Russia that that was true, that there were extraterrestrial intelligences that were visiting the earth, and that information went to the Vatican through this Freemason.
Well, you've helped us dot the I's and cross the T's very well, my friend Gabriel, but there's one final question before we do a wrap. And that's coming back to what we introduced this show with, which is the Pope's speculation about whether he would baptize a Martian. What did he eventually say? Did he say he would be willing to baptize a Martian?
Well, what I can say is this. The context, two things. The first thing, the context was that we need to welcome to any person from any country. That was the context. But if you took the history, his background in Argentina with this subject, maybe there was another intention, like a hint for the future regarding something to say.
So, in closing, it's fair to say you are speculating that Pope Francis may very well be very strongly inclined towards a fairly progressive admission about the existence of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet.
Yes, and because this small thought, given that Pope Francis liked a lot Parravicini said about a new papacy for the future, to unite the world, and a future where extraterrestrial intelligence is going to be revealed to the world.
Well, on that closing, I think that's a really good point to end on. Thank you for provoking all of us, Gabriel, and we all look forward to reading your book, and we'll make sure we display it in the end notes and make sure people can link to it. But Gabriel Piedra, thank you so much for joining Reality Check, and thank you for giving us a, how does one say this, a contrarian view on what the Vatican really thinks about UFOs.
You're welcome, Ross, and thank you for having me.
Thank Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.